My crush pretended to like me back, then laughed in my face. 6 months later, he was begging me to give him a chance. I liked Nico for almost 2 years before I worked up the courage to tell him. We were in the same friend group all through junior and senior year of high school. He was funny and charming and had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. When he talked to me, I felt special. When he remembered small details about my life, I thought it meant something. When he started texting me more often, asking to hang out, just the two of us, I convinced myself he felt the same way. I was 17 and stupid and believed what I wanted to believe. I told him at a party the summer after graduation, pulled him aside, hands shaking, heart pounding, and said I'd liked him for a long time and wondered if he might feel the same way. He smiled, said he'd been waiting for me to say something, said he liked me, too, and had for months, said he didn't want to ruin our friendship by making the first move, but he was so happy I'd been brave enough to do it. I could barely breathe. This was everything I'd wanted. He asked if he could kiss me. I said yes. It was my first kiss, and for about 30 seconds it was perfect. Then I heard the laughter. His friends were standing at the back door watching us. One of them was bent over laughing so hard he could barely stand. Another was slow clapping. Nico pulled away from me with this grin on his face that I'll never forget. He turned to his friends and said, "I told you she'd fall for it." They'd made a bet. Someone had dared Nico to get me too. Confess my feelings, pretend to reciprocate, and kiss me while everyone watched. The whole thing was a game. I was the punchline. I don't remember leaving the party. I just remember being in my car, crying so hard I couldn't see the road, pulling over in a parking lot, and sitting there for an hour until I could breathe again. That was the worst night of my life. The story spread through our entire friend group within days. People I'd known for years were laughing about it behind my back, some to my face. I spent the rest of the summer hiding in my room, dreading college, wondering if I'd ever trust anyone again. Then I went to university for hours away and decided to become someone new. I threw myself into everything, joined clubs, made friends, studied hard, worked out, learned how to dress in ways that made me feel confident. I stopped being the quiet girl who faded into the background. I became someone who walked into rooms and got noticed. It wasn't about Nico anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was worth more than a cruel joke. At a party, by junior year, I changed completely. I had a strong group of friends, a good GPA, and more confidence than I'd ever had in my life. I dated a few people, nothing serious, but enough to know that I was capable of being wanted for real. I barely thought about high school anymore. Then, Nico showed up at my college. He'd transferred after flunking out of his first school and getting rejected from his second choice. Our university was his backup plan. I saw him at a campus coffee shop during the first week of fall semester. He recognized me immediately, but it took him a moment to process what he was seeing. I could tell by the way his expression shifted from recognition to confusion to something I'd never seen on his face before. Interest. He came over to my table and said he almost didn't recognize me. Said I looked amazing. Said it was crazy running into me here after all this time. He acted like we were old friends reconnecting. Like he hadn't humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. Like that kiss hadn't been the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. I smiled and kept the conversation short. Said it was nice to see him and I had to get to class. Didn't give him my number when he asked. Didn't agree to hang out when he suggested it. Just walked away and left him standing there looking confused. Over the next few months, Nico kept finding ways to run into me. Showed up at parties I was at. Sat near me in the library. Joined a club I was in, even though he had zero interest in the actual activities. He started texting me through mutual friends who'd give him my number without asking me first. Always casual, always friendly, always with an undertone of something more. I never took the bait. I was polite but distant, Responded to texts hours later with one-word answers. Declined every invitation to hang out. Never explained why. Never brought up what happened. Just kept him at arm's length while he tried harder and harder to get close. It drove him crazy. I started noticing him everywhere the following week. Tuesday morning, I walked into the library's second-floor study area where I always worked between classes, and there he was at a table 3 rows back. He looked up from his laptop, caught my eye, and waved. I nodded back and chose a seat on the opposite side of the room. Wednesday afternoon, I stopped at the campus coffee shop where I went every day at 2:30 for an iced latte before my 3 o'clock lecture. Nico was in line ahead of me. He turned around when I walked in, smiled like running into me was the best surprise, and asked what I was ordering. I told him and moved past to grab a table while I waited. He brought both our drinks over and tried to sit down. I thanked him for the coffee, said I had reading to finish before class, and put in my earbuds. Thursday evening, I attended the weekly meeting for the environmental club I joined sophomore year. Nico walked in 15 minutes late, looked around the room, and took the empty chair directly across from me. He'd never shown interest in environmental issues before. During the break, Lalani leaned over and whispered that this was getting weird. She asked if I wanted her to tell him to back off. I shook my head and said I could handle it. Friday morning, he appeared at the campus gym during my usual workout time. I saw him on the treadmill watching me in the mirror while I did squats. He wasn't even running, just walking slowly and staring. I finished my set, grabbed my water bottle, and left 20 minutes earlier than normal. Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Nico saying he got my number from someone in our friend group and hoped that was okay. He mentioned he'd been thinking it. Would be good to catch up properly since we were both here now. He suggested coffee sometime. Said he felt bad about how we'd lost touch after graduation. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Another part was curious what he could possibly say about what happened. I texted back 2 hours later and said, sure. Coffee sounded fine. We made plans to meet Monday after my morning classes at the cafe on the south end of campus. Monday came and I almost didn't go. I stood outside the cafe for 3 minutes debating whether to walk away. But I'd already agreed and I wanted to see if he would actually acknowledge what he'd done, or just pretend it never happened. I pushed open the door and found him already there at a corner table with 2 drinks in front of him. He stood up when he saw me, smiling. That same charming smile that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me tired. He said he'd ordered for me. Remembered I liked vanilla lattes. I sat down and thanked him. He started talking immediately about his classes, his new apartment off campus, how different college was from what he'd expected. He asked about my major and seemed genuinely interested when I told him about the research project I was working on. He complimented my hair, said he loved the new style. He mentioned a party coming up that weekend and suggested we should go together. I kept my answers short and pleasant, told him about my classes in basic terms, said my research was going well, thanked him for the compliments without elaborating, declined the party invitation by saying I already had plans. I watched him work harder with each passing minute, trying different topics and angles to get me engaged in real conversation. He never once mentioned high school beyond vague references to our friend group. Never brought up the party that summer. Never acknowledged the bet or the kiss or the laughter. He acted like our last interaction had been some normal goodbye before we headed off to different schools. Like we were old friends who'd simply drifted apart and now had a chance to reconnect. After an hour of this careful small talk, Nico leaned forward and his expression shifted to something more serious. He said he'd been thinking about me a lot since seeing me again on campus. He admitted he'd always wondered what might have happened if we'd stayed in touch after graduation. He said he'd love to hang out more now that we were at the same school. Maybe make up for lost time. I smiled and told him that sounded nice, keeping my voice friendly but offering nothing concrete. I glanced at my phone and said I needed to get to class. He asked for my schedule so we could coordinate better. I stood up and said I'd text him sometime. I walked out before he could suggest anything else. Leilani was waiting in our apartment when I got back. She'd finished her classes early and made tea for both of us. She asked how the coffee went before I'd even put my bag down. I sat on the couch and told her it went exactly how I'd expected. Nico had spent the entire hour pretending the past didn't exist while testing whether I was still interested in him. He'd complimented me, acted fascinated by my life, suggested future plans, all without once acknowledging why we'd stopped talking in the first place. Leilani asked what I was planning to do about it. I realized as I said it out loud that I didn't actually need to do anything except keep living my life the way I had been. His complete inability to acknowledge what he'd done told me everything I needed to know about whether he'd really changed.